So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another wonderful episode of Between Two Bits with your... Hey, wait a minute, man. Where's the millennial?
He's slacking.
1, 2, 3. Seriously, are these millennials always on leave, man?
Shocking behaviour. He's probably actually gone to a beach somewhere so he can pretend that he's still a lifeguard. You know, practicing his old tricks. Yeah.
So at least, as you can see, guys, we're going to be four today. I've got the very Mr. Grumpy. Seriously,
well, you're
taking the whole persona with you, aren't you? You know,
I couldn't resist. You've been calling me Mr. Grumpy for such a long time. I thought I had to get the T-shirt. So there we go. And half of it's going to disappear because I've got a green screen behind me. So therefore, you're probably missing the hat. But yeah, I did that for you, Jason.
I love you too, man. It's perfectly fine. So we have Mr. Richard Hall with us today.
Well, hi everybody, and we also have Denise with us here today.
Hi everybody. How's everyone today?
Oh, we need to have a Twitter stream and do this live at some point, so that when we do ask those sort of things, we can get live responses coming up.
Yeah.
Although that might be a bit dangerous.
That could be very dangerous.
Can you imagine the amount of editing we'd maybe have to do?
And with us as well, we have the lovely Mr. Justin Davidson.
Bonjour.
You know, your shirt looks very
Colorado, USA. Ah, thank you. Switching it up a little bit.
So Colorado, where exactly is that in the USA?
Colorado, it's near the center of the USA, actually. But I'm in the mountains, and we had some amazing, actually. I don't know, can we talk about dates? But the fireworks here were absolutely stunning last night. And I can go up on a hill and see literally 100 fireworks shows going on at the same time. It was, I've never experienced anything like it.
I don't think that anyone's going to top the fireworks in New York City last night. And I'll be a little biased.
For those of you guys wondering, for those of you guys wondering what we're talking about fireworks, we're actually recording this on the 5th of July. So it's just been right after the 4th of July. Long weekend. So how did you guys spend your weekend? And let us know in the comments how you, and please like and subscribe. I'm going to say it now because we always forget all the time, you know. Like the episode, subscribe, ask us questions, you know.
Please like the episode, please.
Today, we're going to be talking about trusting data. Do you trust your data? I think this is one of those things one of those areas where, you know, it's data. If it's written down, should you trust it? So let's start with a very, very kind of obvious question for you guys. What do you trust more, your gut or your data?
That's what I'm looking at.
Yeah, I mean, for example, if I've got a stomachache and my Fitbit's telling me that I'm doing okay, I'm trusting the stomach, I'm trusting the gut, not the data. Right. But I think this is a really massive topic, isn't it? Because we're going through an age now where we've got data coming out of our ears. Unfortunately, it's good and bad. And the real problem is, how do you tell the difference? How do people tell the difference? I think that's the key issue here. It's not whether you trust your data, it's whether you trust the right data. Although maybe I'm a bit biased on that because I'll go straight to the point now. I am thinking about what we see online, things that we see on all sorts of different online products like Facebook, Twitter, even LinkedIn, Jason, as you were discussing on LinkedIn, your LinkedIn post the other day. I mean,
I put a bit of a rant, right? Because nowadays, you look at stories on LinkedIn or you look at stories on other social media, you know, Facebook, Twitter, and it's the same story rehashed in 20 different ways. You know, can you really trust what's being put out there?
Or it's the inspirational
stories? Are the stories just meant to be to teach, or the stories are just there because people want to pull up their egos? I think that's an interesting one, though.
I think we all aspire to trust data, right? I mean, my wife and I will be, you know, talking about any kind of random topic, and you know, we constantly fact check each other. You know, you pull out your phone and say, "Oh, I don't know about that." but I think, to answer the question, I mean, I think we want to trust data. We want to trust the information sources that we have available to us, but often my gut tells me the data is wrong. So I'm not sure. I trust my
Justin,
gut to tell me when to not trust the data.
Justin, you should trust your gut to trust whatever your wife is telling you. I can't believe you're there fact checking. Are you sure? Let's just check this. I don't believe what you're saying. Wow.
That's a good point. It's good.
What happened to the happy wife,
that's
happy
brave.
life,
Slippery slope. Yeah.
What do you think, Denise?
It is. It's one of those things, like you look at the internet right now too, right? And there's so many stories out there. Who's saying that those fact checkers are actually getting the right data to determine that that story is correct or not? Like, what makes them so accurate that the same data they're looking at is better than the data I'm looking at, right? So it does really start to question you about so much data is out there. What do you start to believe these days, right?
Well, I think when it comes to the fact checkers, though, that you've mentioned there, I think you do have to check what they're saying as well, obviously, because you tend to get biased fact checking, which is quite worrying, actually. I mean, we're starting to sort of go into this world of almost 1984 with the sort of, is it the Ministry of Truth? And people have their own truths, and that's what causes this problem in a lot of cases, because people don't try to find fault with the information. They don't try and find flaws in what they're looking at. They look to find proof of what they're saying, which is not the scientific way at all. So when you talk about, in fact, this is a great one, COVID. So the whole COVID debate with vaccinations and everything else that went on there, social media was littered with people that hunted out a single rogue doctor that was, beyond it a little bit and slightly strange, who, because he had MD or she had MD after their name, or they'd done something tenuously connected to medicine, like they were a bone doctor or something. And they said that they didn't agree with the vaccination. That was proof.
Bone doctors, we have nothing against you.
But we love
bone doctors.
Yes, I mean, yes, indeed, and I've broken my arm a few times. Nothing against bone doctors, but it's a specialist, somebody that's got a specialism in a field that's kind of connected, that is saying something completely different to the majority of the specialists in the actual domain that we're talking about, and they use that, and then those messages get proliferated and they go out, and then other people find other facts and edited stories, edited videos, and these things end up on social media, and people do believe that if something's written down or published, it must be fact, it must be true. I mean, I only have to go back to when I was at school and the internet wasn't really around. We had bulletin boards, but the internet wasn't really around. So you go to the library and you go to an encyclopedia, and you trusted what was in the encyclopedia because it was written down and published. And there's a whole generation of people that have never had to check their data because they've always trusted that what's written down is true. And I think that we're seeing a big problem with that now with social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, etc. When people post something, it's seen as being published, and therefore it must be true. And that's a real big problem I think we're suffering from at the moment.
Yeah, another thing too, you said about trusting the data, right? I look at my credit card bill. Right. First, I don't trust the data because I don't think I use my credit card that frequently when I get the bill, right? Because I swear I don't use it that much. But, there are still items on that credit card bill that are not mine. And how many people actually don't even look at their credit card bills and probably just pay the amount that they were told to pay and don't do that level of research either. And there's a lot of fraudulent things placed on credit cards too. And again, it's just bad data or bad use of data. Also, right?
Justin, you were saying? You wanted to say?
Oh, I was just, acknowledging that I'm often one of those people who just pays the damn bill. Get it out of my face.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things when we talk about the trust of the data, right? Do you trust everything that's written down? Here, we're also looking at the ethical use of the data itself, right? In essence.
Yeah.
And I think there is one thing that, as data professionals, there's one thing that we can acknowledge, after all the research and everything is coming out, which is how companies like Cambridge Analytica, influenced that trust of the data. Do people no longer trust much of what is, given to them firsthand, even if it's by professionals, because of the broken trust that the whole Cambridge Analytica scandal brought in? Did that affect the trust when it came to how the information was disseminated during the COVID pandemic, for example?
I think the Cambridge Analytica thing is really interesting because the people that worked on that will know to trust the data because they used the data to collect great swathes of people, individuals who thought in particular ways and could be manipulated. And they got that so right. I mean, what they did was genius. I hate them. Sorry. I mean, I really do dislike what they did. But what they did was absolute genius. They used it for nefarious purposes and it's caused problems all around the world as far as I'm concerned. But I can't say again, what they did was absolutely brilliant. But it has, I think, led to people not trusting data, but trusting the wrong sort of data. So one of the things that Cambridge Analytica did in the UK was, I'm going to mention it, Brexit, but they were targeting people who had particular likes or dislikes. So a lot of people who were massively pro animal welfare, for example, they targeted those people with things suggesting that the EU, for example, were going to be doing horrible things to animals. And they believed it because it looked like it was official. So they've created a problem with sort of engineering people into believing rubbish. I wanted to use a different word then, but I reined it in. But I think we do have to keep in mind that what they did was absolutely genius, and their use of data was spot on, but they distributed horrendously bad data in order to groom their audience.
I think what they did, interestingly, plays right back into what you originally said, Richard, which is they played off of confirmation bias, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, they just found targets, they understood what the bias was, and they provided tidbits that either, provided an angle that seemed to align with that person's belief, or out and out provided, BS that aligned with that person's belief. And if it seems official enough, hey, click, and you see more of it. And your bias is confirmed again and again and again.
The thing is that it's these kind of trusts as well. I mean, and even we see it recently with what is currently going on now with the January riots at the Capitol, right? Mm-hmm. So how the information is then used to be able to, or knowingly using false information to drive certain reactions from certain demographics, right? Mm-hmm. So something which is quite commonly seen there. So when it comes to data, do you think that there is something that could happen, or something that we can, or any kind of controls that we could have over that data to stop that from happening, or to reduce it? Or is it something which has spiraled out of control because of the amount of data that there is out there nowadays?
I think it's the amount of data. Yeah.
I mean, there is one control in place, and it's called common sense. And I think that truly, I mean, people throw common sense to the wind a lot. If something sounds, if the microcomputers invading your system that were designed by the United States and Chinese government sounds like it's pretty far-fetched and probably isn't the cause for COVID. It probably isn't the cause for COVID.
So what I mean, when we have all this kind of data, we look at trust, right? One of the things that we generally tend to look at is trust simply all about having good quality data. If you notice that one article is better written than another, or you realize that the data has more interesting points or much more intricate points from a study than another source, you would trust it more or not. So is data trust a data quality problem?
I look at data, trusting my data. I always use that analogy of a three-legged stool, right? You have to have good data. You have to have a good process, and you have to have good technology, right? They all kind of tie in together. If one leg falls off the stool, you don't have trusted data, right? They kind of all go hand in hand with one another. So it's not just being able to trust the data, it's having processes, having people, having technology, and all those other things that really can help you trust that data.
The right data, you have to understand the context of the data that you're looking at. And I think, this comes into, Denise's business to business context, which, we deal with every day. It also, that's the consumer or, public context as well. What data am I looking at, and does it apply to the situation? Is it a bone doctor that's making a COVID diagnosis, or,
yeah, but an actual proper virologist. Yeah.
We love you, bone doctors. We love bone doctors.
I don't want to get a bad name, because I ride motorbikes. You know what's going to happen. I'll end up breaking something, and bone doctors will be watching this and saying, no, we're not going to be treating him. Anyway,
actually, from my experience, bone doctors, orthopedics, especially when it comes to orthopedic surgeons, are the most aggressive kind of surgeons you would ever find in an operating theatre. I'll just put it out there.
They have to be. I was watching a video the other day about they took pretty much a sledgehammer to this steel rod to get it out of some guy's knee, and the steel rod wasn't an accident. The steel rod was put in there to straighten his leg, but the bone had formed around it, and they were whacking this thing to get it out. I was thinking, that can't be good.
We actually call it a human butchery. It's actually called as well, but not on the side. But it's like it is what it is. Going back to the subject, though.
Oh yeah, sorry.
If we're talking about trust, and we're talking about whether people are in an organization, how would you tackle it? Is it something about the culture within the organization?
Oh, it's a culture.
I mean, if you work for a social media company, do you really trust anything that you do? Is it a kind of culture based on the organization, or is it something completely different?
Well, when you talk about the social media company and whether the people that work for it trust the data, I think they're looking at different parts of the data. So what they're looking at might be complete rubbish, right? Posts that people have written, which is complete, but I keep wanting to swear, but I have to keep reining myself in. But they're not looking at that. They're looking at, where's that data coming from? Who's sending that data? What sort of stuff have they sent in the past? And they're building a picture of the individuals. And no matter what the individuals share, the data they're getting is legitimate. So that's the thing. It's the sort of data that you're trying to get. So the data that you might be looking at in one context may be complete rubbish, but in another context is incredibly insightful. And that's the thing. It's understanding what you're trying to get from the data, not just whether the data is good or bad.
A great point. Maybe it's the metadata that doesn't lie. Mm-hmm. The people who work for social media companies, I'm certain, understand that you should never trust any data that is generated by a post. But the underlying information about that data, where it came from, when it came, those bits of information can be very useful, and in some cases can be really critical, especially when you're looking at making a business decision about, based on data, but based on, a specific set of data that you believe to have, context or relevance to your particular business case.
So that comes along, is there maybe a set of guidelines we can give on what could be sort of classified as trusted data, or what do you have to look out for to see if the data you're reading is trustworthy or not to a certain degree? I mean, you can never say 100%, right? But are there any points that we can bring in for our listeners to, if you're looking at trusted data, these are the kind of things that you should be looking out for?
I think when it comes to trusted data, I think you need to have an expert, at least one expert in the domain, to tell you what you're looking at, what the data is actually telling you, and how much they trust that. Then you've got other elements of trust. For example, like our trust score. It doesn't understand the data as such. It doesn't know exactly what that data is talking about generally, but it is able to look at patterns in the data essentially. And I'm not going to go into too much detail about this because, one, I don't fully understand the algorithms that are used, and two, I probably shouldn't be revealing the algorithms that should be used, that are used, even if I did understand them. But that's not talking about whether the data is factually correct. It's whether it's good quality, it's consistent and stuff like that. So I think you need to have several different views on the data and opinions on the data from different people, different specialists, before you can actually understand whether it's fully trusted and whether it's trusted in the context that you want to look at it.
It's true, right? Because everything you say, Richard's correct, because we can all look at the same set of data to get information out of it, but every one of us have a different use for that data, and it might mean something different for every one of us. And that happens in organizations too. This data has been sitting out there for years, and everybody has a different perception and a different understanding of what that data means to them too.
Yeah, but I think it's also it's like Justin said, maybe instead of looking at the data to see if it's trustworthy, then we should be looking at the metadata instead.
Yeah.
And making a decision of, yes, where this data came from is a reputable source, so the data should be in some respects correct or not.
The documentation is the most critical part. Once I understand something, or we understand what it means to me, being able to document it so we're not asking that question again, right? And then have that information available to make those correct decisions moving forward.
So with this, guys, what I'm gonna add is, what steps or what guidance can we give our viewers to whether you can trust the data or not? At least I think we can come up with 4 points, right?
There are parameters, is the data timely? Is it new?
Mm-hmm.
Is it old? Is it outdated?
Yeah.
I mean, things like this can really be critical, depending on the data that you're looking at. Is it complete? Are you looking at, something that has, is riddled with gaps, riddled with holes? Or is it, is everything that you need to find there? I mean, those are two things that come to mind right off the bat for me.
Yeah, I think
point one is the data timely. Point two, Richard.
Well, no, I was just going to follow on from that actually, because the way in which the data arrives and the frequency or the rate at which the data comes in. If you're looking at highly transactional data, for example, then you get a 3-day pause in that. Then it starts coming in every hour, a record every hour. Then it starts coming in every millisecond. You immediately know that there's something that's not quite right about that. So I think what Justin said there is actually key. But I think we can't narrow this down to 4 points, because I think trusting your data depends on, again, what I said earlier, what you're using the data for, where the data is coming from, who the data is coming from, and so many other things that I'm not thinking about because I've been put on the spot now, and I'm just worried that we've got an audience of people who are specialists, and I'm going to look like a bit of an idiot. So I'm going to stick with those 3, but there will be more.
So just like every other day, right?
Funny guy.
Sorry, I just had to sneak that one in. Sorry.
No, that's fine. We'll discuss it later. But I've lost my train of thought now. I think every different type of use of data has a different requirement for whether it's, or a different set of characteristics that need to be fulfilled before you can actually fully trust it. So just to say there are 4 points to this, I don't think that there are, but I could be wrong on that. I'm not going to claim to be.
So I can summarize yours as point 2, understand the context of the data.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the
What does the data
context
mean?
is
What's
really
it
big
from?
though. I mean, that's the ticket. How do you get to that?
Yeah, context is massive. Context is, that. But I'll go with that one because that does kind of encompass what I was saying. That you need to sort of fully understand what you want to get from the data and where it's coming from, etc., etc.
Denise,
Yeah,
I'll put you on the spot now.
I know it's a tough question because again, those points could be very different depending on who you're talking to. I'll agree with both Richard and Justin. I think timely and the context of that data, I think, are probably the most critical ones of being able to really trust and make sure that you understand your data, right? I mean, if you don't have context around the data, it doesn't mean anything to anybody, right? I mean, again, it's an open-ended topic that can go on with many different deeper meanings, but I think those two are probably the most critical things that a person should be looking at.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would add is always check the source. Always check where the source of the data is coming from.
Yeah.
With an organization, if the data is coming from your data analyst, you can pretty sure agree that the data should be correct. Or you should be able to trust that data where that is coming from. But if we're looking at life and we're looking at all the kind of articles that we see online and everything, I mean, who are you going to trust? Something that comes from the Wall Street Journal or something that comes from Bob, who studied at the University of Life? And I added because apparently it's something extremely common, especially in this world of social media.
I would just go as far as to say, don't trust any data from Nigel Farage. Basically, anything that comes from a man like that, or Breitbart, or any of these other. We're getting far too political now, but don't trust those. Sorry. So
that'll get bleeped out, so don't worry about it.
I do think that,
but it's a good mention.
That's a good point. I guess the first thing I would say is just question the data. Yeah. Ask yourself questions about the data. And I think that we all have gone into the room and, somebody pops up some statistic or factoid, and you just kind of look at it and go, and, we should be asking ourselves, the very first thing is ask yourself, does this data seem correct? And what do I know about the data itself? What do I know about the source, the relevance, the timeliness, the context, the on and on and on?
Sorry, Justin, I've got to bring this up again. When you're saying you walk into a room and someone brings up a factoid and you're like, no. Are you talking about your conversations with your other half again? Because this is going to get you into so much trouble. So much trouble if she's watching this.
No, that happens. I think we just have a habit of, I say something and she goes, she says something, that's what 25 years will do to you, guys.
She's good. That's not strictly true, is it, Justin?
So guys, there we have it today. Just a bit more about what we think when it comes to trust and data. And one of the things that you might have noticed is that we've actually started splitting our podcast. What do we mean by that? So we have a second segment, which very awesome Mr. Richard Hall does, called Job of the Week. And we've actually taken it out from this main video. So now we will have on one end the video with the actual podcast. We're trying to get it under 30 minutes. To see it works. Usually it works. I mean, if we start to blank out all of Richard's parts, we can probably get it down to maybe even 15. But I mean, we're all about representation and making sure that everyone has an equal voice around here. So we're going to be doing that. Another thing as well that we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at bringing in some guest speakers around. as well. Having them added in, bring a bit of voice to the team, just simply so that we can have a bit more of an opinion compared to everyone else. Of what
That's
you're
good, because
already
Richard
starting to
has
get
no
used to.
opinions.
Completely.
I'm always sat on the fence, me. You know, can't quite put my step over the line in the sand. But okay, so is this where I'm supposed to be introducing what?
Yes,
the
and
job
now
of the week?
on the video, which is not on this video but in the next video, you will come across Mr. Richard Hall's job of the week. And what did you put at the job of the week this time?
This time, it's actually a follow-on from the last week's episode, and I had to check because we've had a bit of a pause in between recording these. But this week, we're going to be looking at getting data from your Fitbit. So previously, it was to do with authentication or OAuth 2 authentication for Fitbit. And this week, we're going to be using that in order to gain some data. And you guys will see just how much time I spend on the tennis court and how bad I am at tennis.
So along those lines, I just want to say, your Fitbit, question your Fitbit. Even though that data seems solid, my watch started claiming that I was running about 2 minutes a mile faster than I actually was. And I thought for a while that, wow, my speed has really improved here. So
I don't get why my watch tells me one distance or steps that I've taken, and my phone, which I carry with me, gives me a different stat. So it's very interesting that both are with me at all times while I'm out walking or running my errands, but they both have totally different stats on them. So I find that interesting, and they're both Apple products too.
And Richard will be solving this problem in his job of the week segment here. So
I tell you what, with the Fitbits, right? My other half has got a Fitbit. I've got a Fitbit. We've had them for a few years, and I discovered that the ladies get a little bit more out of the Fitbit app than us blokes do, because obviously they've got other considerations. Let's put it that way. So I switched my Fitbit over to be female just to see what it would tell me. Now I've changed it back to being male. I still get monthly alerts that my time of the month is coming up. Let's put it that way. I can't get rid of them. Every month I get an alert on my phone at different times as well, telling me, you know, you're just about to start. I'm like, I've set you back to male. But you know, that's the thing that maybe we could have focused on. We could do a whole episode about the inaccuracies.
On trusting your smart.
I go with your gut on that one.
Yeah, go with the gut.
You never know what's going to happen right there, right?
Okay.
So thanks everyone for listening, and have a lovely day. Take care, guys, until the next episode.